Okay. Okay. Okay, let's just quickly get back into what we were in the middle of the discussion we were just having. Remember, we were discussing Shmuel's halacha that you're supposed to do a chalitza ma'alya. A chalitza ma'alya means if you have a choice between two chalitzas, better to do, in this case, the chalitza with Basia, the chalitza with Dina versus the chalitza with Rachel or Leah. Why? What's wrong with the Rachel or Leah chalitza? Because since we hold Yesh Zika, Rachel and Leah are achos kukasai, and therefore the chalitza with them is like a lower level chalitza, better to do with the other ones. The Gemara then said, no, la'olam, Shmuel holds Ein Zika. What do you mean? Shmuel holds Ein Zika? No, he's speaking according to the man number holds Ein Zika. So now we're working within the opinion of Ein Zika, and so says the Gemara like this: Bishlama, guys, Aaron, keep it down. Talk, but just slightly lower.
Yeah, don't talk. Better.
Slightly lower. No, talk. It's okay. So the Gemara said like this. We'll pick up from the Bishlama because that's really where it was. Bishlama tzara the Rachel loyti pater. I understand in the case that Dina is not going to become pater. Why? The kivin the chalutz la Leah, the hadar chalutz la Rachel, because since Levi first did chalitza with Leah, now Rachel is who? The achos chlutzasai. So then Dina is not going to get covered. Havila chalitza de Rachel chalitza psula. Now chalitza with Rachel won't work. Yeah, therefore, it's not going to be good. Elatzara de Leah tipater. Why isn't Basia okay when the chalitza is done with Leah? Again, if you hold no Zika, right, then there's nothing wrong. Meaning Rachel would be achos chlutzaso once you did the chalitza with Leah, and that's a problem regardless of Zika. So even if you hold no Zika, there's no achos kukasei, but there is still achos chlutzaso. But now the order matters. So if Levi did chalitza with Leah first, now Rachel is the sister of his chalutza. Yeah. So since she's the sister of his chalutza, now all of a sudden doing chalitza with Rachel is weaker than the chalitza of Dina, so it won't cover Dina. But if Levi does the chalitza with Leah, why shouldn't that cover Basia? So the Gemara says, you're right. Meaning you're right. When he said tsaros are not going to be covered by the sister, he specifically meant Dina. Basia would be covered. Vahat tsaros kamar. It was plural. It's mashma Basia and Dina. Tsaros the alma. The plurality was only referring to the Dinas of the world, but not Dina and Basia. But really Basia is okay. Because since there's no Zika in the situation, and the first chalitza is with Leah, there's nothing wrong with chalitza with Leah.
So
Leah's
Dina? Tsaros the Alma.
Tsaros the Alma meaning Shmuel's statement was simply that when you have sisters, the tzara of the second sister isn't going to be covered by Rachel's chalitza. Tsaros just means if, let's say, in many scenarios where it's an achos chlutzaso, when it's an achos chlutzaso here, then the chalitza of Rachel will not cover Dina, and when it says plural, it just means the many scenarios of this in the world. Whenever you have this case, but really it's specifically referring to Dina. Meaning la'olam, the halacha would be that if Levi did chalitza to Leah, Basia is covered. And why shouldn't she be? Basia is a normal. There's no Zika. So what's the problem with Leah? Leah is a regular Yevamos. Says the Gemara, ihachi, and this is where we were holding. Ihachi, and here, what's the ihachi? If you say that it's Ein Zika, right, and we're saying that the tsaros that Shmuel was referring to, right, is the tzara of Rachel, that's the only thing he's referring to. He's referring to a woman who, Dina, if that's what you're telling me Shmuel meant, that Dina cannot be covered by the chalitza of Rachel, because Rachel is the sister of his chalutza Leah, then chalutz letzaros niftaru achios. Are you telling me that if Levi chose to do chalitza with Dina, it would cover Rachel? This is how I kept on saying Bas, but I meant Dina. If you're telling me, so right, that was Shmuel's statement. Shmuel's statement was chalitza with Rachel won't cover Dina, but the chalitza of Dina will cover Rachel. Says the Gemara, why? How does this help? Rachel doesn't cover Dina because Rachel is the achos chalutzasa of Leah. Well, isn't Dina just the tzara of an achos chalutzasa? That's the question of the Gemara. I mean, really, it's a very simple question. Very similar. Before the question was a tzara of an achos kukasai. And the Gemara, because of that, had to come off of saying yesh zika. But you can't say there's ein chlutzasa here. Achos chlutzasa was always aser. So here you don't have the answer of saying that we can hold like a different opinion. Nice. Says the Gemara, "V'atzaras Rachel mi miftara." Is the chalitza with Dina going to really pater Rachel? Meaning, if Rachel can't pater Dina, Dina can't pater Rachel. And why would Shmuel say one works and the other one doesn't? And what's the proof that that's so? V'hatanan, Asr Adam b'tzaras krovas chlutzas, which is a fancy way of saying you're asr to have yibum with the tzara of your achos chlutzasa, meaning Dina. So since Rachel is achos chlutzasa, Dina is the tzara of achos chlutzasa. So just like you said before, what do you mean? If a tzara is asr, just like the regular person's asr, well, if Dina is a problematic chalitza and she can't cover Dina, well, then Dina is a problematic chalitza and she can't cover Rachel. So why would Shmuel make a distinction? Gemara says two answers. And the two answers will take us to the two dots. Answer number one is, you're right. We're still holding within the opinion of Ein Zika. And therefore, and when Shmuel said his halach, he was specifically referring to Dina. And what he meant is as follows. Shmuel nami hischil v'lo hischil ka'amar. Shmuel was not saying that if Levi did chalitza to Leah, now he can only do chalitza to Dina and not to Rachel. That's not what it's saying. What it's saying is the following. Let's say, now going back to the very beginning, let's say Levi did chalitza with Leah. Lo yigmor betzaros. He shall not finish with Dina, meaning by starting with a sister in either one of the scenarios, meaning either Leah or Rachel, whichever sister you start with, don't now go and do chalitza with the other woman, the tzara. Meaning, if he did chalitza with Leah first, this is going to be a problem. Why? The Tanan asar adam b'tzaras krovas chlutzasa, because this is tzara achos chlutzasa. And it's, by the way, the same thing in the other direction. If Levi did chalitza with Rachel first, then don't do chalitza with Basia now, because that is going to be tzaras achos chlutzasa in both directions. He's just telling you, if you have a choice, Reuven and Shimon have died, you have these four ladies falling to you, don't start the first chalitza with either one of the sisters, because now you create a problem with the other house, because both of them are problematic because of achos chlutzasa. However, hischil b'tzaros, if Levi starts with either Basia or Dina, it doesn't make a difference. We'll just say he starts with Dina. If he starts, no, you know what, let's start Basia. That's what we're talking about. Levi starts with Basia, now what happens? Shimon's house is taken care of. And Reuven and Shimon are both dead. Yeah. Levi does chalitza with Basia, so that means these two people are good.
Right.
What about over here? Is there any reason why he can't do chalitza with any of these ladies? Why? Rachel is the sister of Leah. So what? I'm allowed to. I mean, I didn't. She never did chalitza with Leah, so chalitza with Rachel is fine, and chalitza with Dina is fine also. What would be the problem? Because she's the tzara of what? I mean, so says the Gemara. Yigmor af ba'achyos, he can even do chalitza with Rachel. If he starts with Basi, he could do Rachel. Or if he starts with Dina, he could do Leah. Why? Because since he started with the tzara, who has no relational issers, he could finish with the other house's sister even.
Could he do Yibam now?
1 second, we'll get to that. We'll think about that in a second. The Tanan, why is this true? Mutter adam bekrovas tzaras chlutzasai. A person is allowed to be with, let's say in this case, Rachel, who is the relative of the tzara of his chalutza. He did chalitza with Basia, who's the tzara of Basia, Leah, and Leah's sister is Rachel. A person is allowed to be with the sister of the tzara of his chalutza. Meaning he's allowed to do. Meaning he's allowed to do yibum.
He's allowed to do.
He's allowed to do yibum. Meaning, because think about it. Reuven, again, if you hold Ein Zika.
Right.
Only if you hold Ein Zika.
If not, then you'll get Zika.
If you hold Zika, then it's Achos Kukase, and that's a different problem. Yeah. It's only if you hold Ein Zika, because we're only coming to address the question of Chalutza. Right? So since Levi did Chalitza with Basia, and Basia is not related to anyone, therefore I have no Achos Chalutzaso here. So Leah and Rachel have never become Aser. So Leah is covered by Basia's Chalitza. What about Reuven's house now? You could do even with either one of these ladies. Very passion. Now, if you did Chalitza with Leah, it creates problems. If you did Chalitza with Rachel first, it creates problems. Right. All Shmuel is really saying is, who do you do Chalitza with first?
If you do it back, you don't have a problem.
Right. Or Dina. Whichever one of the tzaras you do it, then you could figure the other house out no matter what. But again, this is predicated on Shmuel speaking in the opinion of Ein Zika. Of course, if you hold the Yesh Zika, then it's a problem. Because even it doesn't make a difference who did Chalitza to. The moment Reuven and Shimon died, you have two sisters who are Achos Kukase. And therefore, their Chalitza is a Chalitza Psula. So the Gemara said, oh, thank you so much, Big Tzaddik. Yeah? So since Rachel and Leah are Achos Kukase, Dina and Basia would be Tzaras Achos Kukase, which the Gemara had asked earlier, would be, why would one be good and the other one not be good? We have to come off of saying Ein Zika. So now the Gemara, that's actually the second terms. Rav Ashi Amar, Rav Ashi says, Lo'olam Kidika Amres, Lo'olam Yesh Zika. Lo'ilam Shmuel is going in his own opinion. And if he goes Yesh Zika, what was the original question? Let's remind ourselves. If you hold Yesh Zika, why would Shmuel say I could do a chalitza with Dina covers Rachel, but a chalitza with a Rachel doesn't cover Dina? Why? This is the tzara, and there's no difference between the tzara and the woman herself. Says the Gemara, no. It's because we do make a distinction between the tzara and the woman. Meaning when we're talking about an erva, that's minat Torah. An erva minat Torah, we don't make a distinction between the erva herself and the tzara of the erva.
Right.
Whereas when you're talking about a derabanan, so to begin with, let's be honest, the zika is still always going to be there. So there is a difference. When the rabbi said you can't marry Rachel, you can't do chalitza with Rachel. Why? Because the yibum with her is a problem because she's achos zikasa, skukasa, right? So this is the rabbanan.
That's what Yesh Zika.
Yesh Zika says that Rachel and Leah as sisters creates a problem of achos kukasa.
Yeah.
So what do we want to say? That Dina is a tzara of achos kukasa? That already is a step removed from the derabanan. We're creating isurim here. It's not that when you think about an erva, let's say Bitoy, yeah? So let's say Rachel was Levi's daughter, right? So this is now a deraisa situation. That means there's no zika whatsoever with Rachel, and the Torah tells us that Dina, who's a tzaras erva, well, what is she now? She's achos isha. Sorry, she's the ashes ach without a mitzvah. So she's also an erva. So a tzaras erva is an erva. That's the reason why tzaras is always a problem. Like we said when we learned the Moshe from the beginning. But not just minat Torah. It's specifically because when you no longer have the mitzvahs yibum and you're the wife of your brother, you're an erva. That means you're pater. Every erva is always pater from yibum. So there's no difference between an erva and a tzaras erva. But if it's midarabanan, so that means on a Torah level, Rachel has a zika and Dina has a zika. Come along the rabbis and say, 1 second, we don't want you to marry Rachel because marrying Rachel looks a lot like marrying your wife's sister. Why? Because you're sort of quasi-married to Leah. Therefore, but you're not quasi-married to Leah's, to Dina's sister. So what would be the reason for the rabbis to ask her Dina? Only because what? It looks like a tzaras erva? That's already like a rabbanon on a rabbanon. You see the difference? Because now, why should Dina be usher? Dina herself has no problem. It's only midrabbanon. What's the concern? The concern is because we might allow you to marry Rachel? No. The concern is we might allow you to marry a tzaras erva. But this isn't even a case of it. This is a tzara of a derabbanan iser, which herself is only a problem because of Leah. Dina and Leah have no relation. Therefore, says the Gemara, L'olam Shmuel will say that why can I do a chalitza with Dina to cover Rachel? Because this chalitza is a stronger chalitza because the yibum with her is mutter. Not mutter, but it's more mutter. Meaning really yibum with her is also because she's the tzara. Meaning midrabbanan, she's also a problem. It's just that she's less a problem than Rachel herself. So therefore, the distinction means as long as you have a difference in two chalitzas, the Gemara is going to say that you should do. Shmuel is going to say you should do the better one. Now, the Gemara wants to bring a brisa to bring a raya to Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi again, his answer is that loyal of Shmuel yesh zika, and the reason why chalitza with Dina or Basya works is because Dina is the tzaras are like their zika is a little bit stronger and their chalitza therefore is stronger, so you should do the chalitza with them. Says the Gemara, Tanya Kavas the Rav Ashi. Just a little bit. It's just hard to yeah. Tanya Kavas the Rav Ashi. What's a raya that you hold the zika by Shmuel and that the tzaras of the sisters have a stronger zika and therefore the chalitza is a stronger chalitza? Because the following statement of the Bryce. Cholotz la'achyos, these are basically the same exact words of Shmuel. Cholotz la'achyos, if you did chalitza with either Rachel or Leah, loy niftaru tzaros, Dina and Basi are not covered. However, the diuk in that is ha l'tzaros niftaru achyos. The diuk would be that if you did, so what do you see? You see that doing chalitza with either Basi or Dina works to cover Rachel and Leah, which, by the way, is not like, that only works like Rav Ashi. If you hold like the first answer, that's not true, because the first answer holds that meaning if you're going with the answer of Ein Zika, then Rachel and Levi did chalitza with Leah, then Rachel is achas chlutzasai and Dina is tzaras achas chlutzasai. That Gemara held that Dina and Rachel are both problematic. So why would we say over here that you could do chalitza with Dina to cover Rachel? Really, Dina and Rachel are equal. Only if you hold yesh zika, and the whole reason that there's a problem here is because once you've done chalitza with Leah, all what Shmuel is saying is because of yesh zika, you can't do with Rachel. And Dina, who's only a tzara of achas kukaso, right? He holds that tzara drops down a level, and
You're
therefore the
right.
chalitza is stronger. So therefore Dina can cover Rachel, but Rachel can't cover Dina. This would be a right of that shita. So my timer, isn't it lav mishum de kasaver yesh zika? And this argument v'lo alima zika l'shavia letzara ke'erva, and we make a distinction between the tzara and the achos kukasai. So Gemara says no raya. Amar Rav Ava bar Mamal hamani beishamai. This brayse that you just brought is the shita beishamai, who in general holds that tzaras are not aser. So don't bring me a raya from a brayse that says that the chalitza of Dina, that the chalitza of Rachel won't work to cover Dina. It's because beishamai, who holds the Tanan beishamai matir and hatzaras la'achin, right? He holds you can do it even with an actual erva. Therefore, it should be, so Reuven dies, leaves over two wives, Rachel and Dina. Remember, they're wives. That means Rachel can't cover Dina because tzaras are mutter, according to Beis Shammai. It's just an exceptional case.
Why do we care what Beis Shammai says?
We don't, but we're trying to explain how a brayse is not a raya. If it's according to Beis Shammai, if I find a random document that says, oh, you see over here that the chalitza with Dina covers Rachel, but the chalitza with Rachel doesn't cover Dina, I have a
So
raya to
what
Rav
is
Ashi.
effectively doing? We were very good.
With who?
Rav Abba.
No, Rav Abba is trying to prove that it's not a raya. Right? The Gemara is trying to Tanya Kavas the Rav Ashi that the tzara of Achas Kukaso is a stronger chalitza, and therefore you should do with Dina and not with Rachel. Because I have a brayse that says do chalitza with Dina and not with Rachel. Says the Gemara, not a raya. That's Beis Shammai, because Beis Shammai holds that a tzara is always even mutter. Ask the Gemara 1 second. If it's Beis Shammai, that according to Beis Shammai, with a regular erva, you're allowed to do yibum with the tzara. So here, why can't you do yibum with Dina? Why would this brayse say do chalitza with Dina?
Levi.
Yeah, Levi should do yibum with Dina.
Because so is a mutter.
Yeah, he holds tzaras are mutter even by an erva. Culture came by achos kukasa. Yeah. I mean, he can always choose to do a chalitza, but why does it say? Why would the brayse be saying he has to do chalitza? It's mashma that the ibam zaser. Gemara says no. You're right. According to Beis Shammai himself, Beis Shammai would say he could do ibam no problem, but he holds like this brayse is like the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. Do you remember Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri? Do you remember the case of Beis Shammai Beis Hillel would still marry each other's families, even though according to one of them the other ones might be right? According to Beis Shammai, if every tzaras erva is mutter, that means when you do yibam with the tzaras erva, according to Beis Hillel, you're sleeping with an erva, and that means the children from that relationship are mamzerim. According to Beis Hillel, according to Beis Shammai, those are regular, good, normal kids, and yet they would still marry each other. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri had made a suggestion: why not just require chalitza of all tzaras? And the Gemara had said, what did the Gemara say? The Gemara said, it's a great suggestion, but they weren't able to make it official until Nitrafa Hashah. They weren't able to get it official. So says the Gemara, this brayse is going like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri's suggestion, that the Omar Boyu V'Niskan Lahem L'Tzaras Yucholtz L'Misyabas, that to fix the Beis Shammai Beis Hillel situation, we just said do chalitza with the tzaras always, because it fixes Beis Shammai's because now you're no longer doing yibum, and it fixes Beis Hillel because you're no longer creating mamzerim. So Gemara says no. How could that be? Didn't the Gemara say that Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri's halacha was never made official? He tried to, but they didn't have enough time. The Gemara says you're right. However, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Achrav, people who came later, Chazru v'tiknu, they took the idea and they made it official. So even though in the times of Yochanan ben Nuri it wasn't, so it wasn't a good solution then, years later, later Tanoim said, you know what, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri's suggestion was a good suggestion, and so therefore to fix the Beis Shammai Beis Hillel situation, they made chalitza mandatory in a situation of a tzara. If that's the case, it explains why the brayse that they found said you should do chalitza with Dina. Why not just do yibum? Because of Beis Shammai says that because Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri told us, and we paskin like this, that, or not paskin like this, we paskin, we hold that this takana was made that whenever you have a tzara, the halacha is you should do chalitza b'di'eved. According to Beis Shammai, to take care of the zika. According to Beis Hillel, it's a waste of time because there's no zika because the tzara is pater. But that'll explain why in this case of it, the Rabbanan, Dina should be done chalitza because with the Rabbanan, she's a tzara, and a tzara, you do chalitza like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. Okay, take a deep breath. What did we just say in the Gemara? Just very, very, very quickly. Rav and Shmuel argued. Well, not argued. They argued what to do in the case where you have, in the other case, when you have 5 brothers, 3 brothers die, leave over 2 brothers, and those 2 brothers have to deal with the 3 wives. What do you do with the middle wife? Rav said you got to do chalitza to both. We explained this because Rav is explaining in the opinion, ironically, of Yesh Zika, that woman in the middle needs now a chalitza from both, because who is she? She's the sister of Chlutzasai, and since she's the sister of Chlutzasai, she needs a chalitza. It's a chalitza garua, it's a chalitza psula. You need a chalitza from both Reuven and Shimon. That was Rav's opinion. The Gemara explained, Rav, how can you hold that? You hold Ein Zika. He says, no, I hold Yesh Zika. And the reason why he said it is because it's happening one after the other. But if they all fell at the same time, they would all need a chalitza from both of them. That was Rav. Shmuel came along and said, no. At first, Reuven, don't look at this. This is going to confuse it. It's a different case. But Reuven and Shimon are the three sisters that fall. That if they all fall at the same time, Reuven could do chalitza with all three, or Shimon could do chalitza with all three. The Gemara was bothered. Well, that makes no sense. If you could do chalitza with all three, isn't Shmuel the one who said if you have a choice between two chalitzas, you should always do the better chalitza? And here you have a better chalitza because the second Shimon does the first chalitza with one of the sisters. The second chalitza is achos chlutzasai. Make Reuven do that chalitza. Gemara says, you're right. Enechanami. Shmuel's answer is, the way we explain Shmuel is, Shimon does one of them, Reuven does the other, and the middle one, either one could do because one is not worse than the other. So really, it comes out, the machlekes Rav and Shmuel is, what do you do with the middle lady? Rav says 2 chalitzas are needed. Shmuel says 1 chalitza is needed. Rav says 2 chalitzas are needed because he holds chalitza psula. A chalitza psula needs from both. Shmuel says no, chalitza psula doesn't need from both. He holds, if you have a choice between doing 2 chalitzas, you should do the better one. But if you have no choice, and they're both the same, then either one works. That's the answer to the Gemara. The Gemara was bothered. According to Shmuel, it should come out that we were bothered that Shmuel holds Yesh Zika, and what he's saying should be applying even to Reuven with the first sister and Shimon with the first sister, right? Because why? If it's Achos Kukasa was a problem, and Shmuel holds Yesh Zika, they're all going to always be a case where you have 2 options, and there's a better option, right? And so therefore, it should be a problem that it's a weak chalitza. So the Gemara says he's going in the opinion of Yesh Zika. The Gemara said once we are saying that he's going in the opinion of Yesh Zika, right? Sorry, Ein Zika. I take it back. Once he's going in the opinion of Ein Zika, so the Gemara said if he holds Ein Zika, the Gemara was bothered. Well, if it's Ein Zika, no, the Gemara started. If it's Yesh Zika, then the tzara should be usher just the same as the regular one. So Lo'ilam he holds Ein Zika, and since it's Ein Zika, there's not going to be a difference between the two. The Gemara said 2 answers. Either Shmuel is just telling us the order it should go in, meaning once you do it with Leah, you have a problem now with Dina. Why? Because what's Dina? She's the tzara of the Achos Kukasai. But once you start with Basya, that's okay, because now you can even do it with Rachel, because there's no problem doing with Rachel, because the Tzaras Chlutzaso's sister is okay. And therefore, once you start with Basi, you can do Rachel. That was the first answer, staying with an Ein Zika. The last answer is no, La'olam, we do hold Yesh Zika. And if that's the case, then how come you're allowed to do, how come Dina can cover Rachel, but Rachel can't cover Dina? If Zika is a thing, then Rachel is an Achos Kukaso, and Dina is just a Tzaras Achos Kukaso. The Gemara's answer is La'olam, no. There's a difference between a Tzara and a regular woman. The regular woman herself is like a worse Zika, and therefore her Chalitza is weak. So Shmuel says you shouldn't do chalitza with her. Rather, you should do chalitza with the tzara, because the tzara is a step removed, because it's a derabbanan, not a deraisa. And the Gemara says there's no raya from that other price, because that's going like Beis Shammai, according to Peter Rabbi Yochanan Nuri, that says you can go ahead and do chalitza to the tzaras to cover them both, and therefore that's why in this brisa it said that you should do chalitza with Dina, although Me'ikra din Beis Shammai would have said you can even do yibam. That's the Maskana Sagamara. The next Gemara is an unrelated piece. We'll pick up. We're going to go to the. Try to go down to the bottom of here. This line of Gemara, I'm not going to say it's easy, but it goes a lot faster. It will help to draw, but I'm going to try to see what we can do. It says the Gemara the following question. We'll use this diagram here. I think this will work for most of the Gemara. Okay. It says the Gemara. I asked the Gemara the following question. Ba'alas haget u'ba'alas mamar. You have Reuven and Shimon, 2 brothers. Shimon has 2 wives, Rachel and Dina. Yeah? What happens if one of them he does a mimer with, and the other one, he gives a get? So not only is he an idiot to give, like the case we saw before, where he gives get to one, he's an idiot. Now he does mimer to one, thinking he'll do yibum, and he gives a get to the other. So instead of doing yibum or chalitza, he does 2 things he's not supposed to do. Mimer makes him married with the Rabbanan to Rachel, and get makes, really it's not with Shimon, sorry. It's with, they're both with
Somebody's under this
Yeah? You guys follow that?
Yeah, cross over Shimon.
He's dead.
He's dead. Shimon's dead. Okay, so Reuven's alive. What's his story? He gives mimer to Rachel and he gives a get to Dina. So the halacha is like this, just a couple things on the outside. Once you do mimer with Rachel, so now the halacha is that chalitza is not going to be enough to pot to her.
There's the wait for him.
Right.
Yeah. He has to also give a get.
Wait for him.
Okay. Once you do mimer with Rachel, so the halacha is that now if you wanted to give chalitza to Rachel, it's not enough. He also has to give her a get mit the Rabbanan. Once you do mimer, it's like a quasi kiddushin. So we don't want people to think you can marry without divorce. So therefore, once you do that, Rachel now needs, if you want to do chalitza with her, chalitza and the get. Also, there's another halacha. If you give a get to a yevama, the halacha is that you're not allowed to do yibum, right? Because just like on a Torah level, if you have done chalitza, she's now your isser, she's your brother's wife. On a certain level, by divorcing her, you've severed the zika enough that you can't fix it by doing yibum. Okay. Not only that, and this is the important thing.
He can still, but he can marry her.
No, it's also
You're allowed to be divorced and then remarry.
not if it's your brother's wife. Once you did, let's say you had.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Yeah. You're right. In the general rule, Rabbi, you okay?
Yeah, I get a cough.
Okay. So let's work this out. So doing maimer to Rachel means she needs a chalitza now, and doing get to Dina means I can't do yibum with. Now,
Doing
maimer with Rachel means she needs a get on top of the chalitza, right? And doing a get with Dina means I can't do yibum. Now, this next line is important. Not only can I not do yibum with Dina, but I also can't do yibum with Rachel. This is based on a pasuk. The pasuk says, "Kiven shaloi bana, shuv lo yivna." Kiven shaloi bana, shuv lo yivna means since I didn't build, meaning by giving a get, I've already made a statement that I'm severing the zika here. So Shimon's house which I'm supposed to build, I chose not to. I made one act with Dina of giving her a get, right? Meaning, let's say the following halacha. Let's say I forget get. Let's say I did chalitza with Dina. Am I allowed to now be with Rachel? No, of course not. Because kiven shalei bana shaloi. Once you choose to end the severing zika relationship, there's a separate new is. This came up earlier in the Masechta. So machlek is whether you hold it's an iser kares or it's just an iser deraisa. But once I do chalitza with Dina, now Rachel is also usher, right? Now, that means if I gave Maimer to Rachel and I give a get to Dina, I'm a very empathetic person. It's a problem for me sometimes. So when I hear someone going through a situation where they're coughing, I can't. I want to make sure you're okay. Some people are germ freaks. I'm like the opposite of a germ freak. Some people, when they see someone coughing, like, get away from me. I'm not like that. I'm the come give me a hug. I feel like I can protect you. But I also feel your pain, and so it's hard for me to.
I have a little bit of both.
Okay. So like this. So Maimer with Rachel again means that technically now you need to get with the Rabbana. Dina, the get with her means that now from both of these ladies, Yibum is usher. Because Kivan Shalebana Shuv Lo Yivna. So if that's the case, the Gemara asked the question: what if I had a case where Balas a get, Balas Maimer? I gave Rachel Maimer and I gave Dina a get. So now I got to do chalitza, right? I got to do chalitza with Rachel. Sorry, I got to do chalitza with Rachel and Dina because I gave a get to Dina. Kivan Shalebana Shuv Lo Yivna means I can't do Yibum with either one of them. So they both. Someone needs a chalitza here. Which one should I give chalitza to? This is related. Why? Let's hear us be mechavan to the Gemara's question. The Gemara's asking, there's an argument to be made that it should go to Rachel, and there's an argument to be made that it should go to Dina.
Why? He has a get. What do you
Feel free to speak it out. It's good. It'll clarify in your own head when we actually read the Gemara. Both of these scenarios, once I've given a get to Dina, now I can't do Yibum with either Rachel or Dina. Right? So no Yibum possibility. Someone needs to get a chalitza. Says the Gemara, you can see why it's related to the Gemara before. Shmuel just said when you have two chalitzas, you should give one over the. We have two possible women to give chalitza. You don't give chalitza to both. That you never do, right? Unless it's, well, okay, we're not going to say you never do, but Rachel and Dina over here, one of them's got to get a chalitza to take care of Shimon's house. Which one should get it? Should I give it to Rachel and cover Dina, or should I give it to Dina and cover Rachel? So that's the Gemara's question.
You have to even get to Rachel and either way.
If I do chalitza to Rachel, she's going to need a get from the Maimer.
But one has a get already.
Correct.
But you have to give a get to this other one also.
You're always going to need to give a get to her, no matter what, because you did a Maimer. That's correct. So do we say? So here, let's read it inside. And we'll see how the Gemara says it. Ba'alas aget u'ba'alas Maimer ezemei hen kodemis. The language here in the Gemara of kodemis is not so correct. Really, what it means is which one gets it.
Why does she need? Why a get? Chalitza will take care of the
Rachel or Dina.
The Maimer one.
Once you do Maimer, that's in the middle of it, mini kiddush.
So why does he do Yibum?
Can't do Yibum once you gave a get to Dina, that takes the whole house out of the parsha of Yibum. Because given Shalabana, Shalavim, Midrabban. Yes, if he jumped the gun, we're not discussing this now, but if he jumped the gun and did Yibum with either one of them, they're married. This is for sure the case. We're only discussing Yisum Derabanan here. This whole thing is only Yisum Derabanan. Says the Gemara, Ezem Hen Kademas. And the Gemara speaks out its question. Ba'alas Haget Adifa, do we say, Dina, it's better to do Chalitza with? Why? Yishum da Aschil Ba B'Chalitza. They change it to da Aschil Ba B'Gerushin. You already started the process of severing the Zika by giving her a get, so just go and finish it. So she's the better one to do Chalitza with, and therefore the Chalitza of Dina will cover Rachel. There are some Rishonim that learn Kodemis is Dafka, that it means that really the Chalitza is needed for both. It's just a question, which one should you do first? You can learn it either way, but we're going to learn it the simple, what I think is the simpler way, that you do Chalitza with Dina. Says the Gemara, why? Because you already started the process by giving her a get. Oh, Dilma, says the Gemara, no, maybe it makes more sense to do Rachel. Why? Because her mimer makes you closer. And therefore, the chalitza is a stronger chalitza. Remember, what was the whole argument in Shmuel we said before? Is whichever woman you have a stronger zika with, that chalitza is a stronger chalitza, so you should do the better chalitza. Okay. So which one should we do here? A chalitza with Dina is a continuation of the act I've already started. That has a certain mila to it. But Rachel is a stronger zika because I've done mimer to her. She's already halfway on her way to being my wife. So maybe the chalitza with her is a stronger chalitza. So which one do I do? So says the Gemara, let's be pushed the shaila. Why? She's closer to being your wife. And therefore, maybe that means that chalitza with her is considered a stronger chalitza. So Amar Ravashi, let's learn from the following brisa. Toshma. The case is not as important. It's a Gemara later in the Masechta, like 30 blot from now, 20 blot from now. Rabban Gamliel says the following thing. Rabban Gamliel, sheyesh get acher maimer, umaimer acher get. So we'll just clarify the case a little bit over here. I'm going to get rid of this. This I need to draw. We're going to look at the case like this. We're talking about the following. I have, let's say, Shimon here. And I have Reuven here. Oh, no, here. Let's look. I have Shimon over here. And let's say Shimon is married to Dina. And Shimon is also married to Rachel. Okay? Now, and then there's a brother Reuven. Now Shimon is going to die. Okay. Two of his wives. So far, not much different, right? So says like this. In this case here, we didn't say which order it happened. We just said he gave mimer to one and get to the other. Says Rabban Gamliel, sheyesh get acher mimer u'mimer acher get. So think like this. If I give a get to, what do you call it? If I give a get, here, let's just write this. Let's say we'll do it. I'm going to draw this a little bit cleaner so it's a little easier to see. Okay. So you have Reuven over here. So it goes like this. Let's say you'll say like this. Let's say he gave mimer to Rachel, right? If he gave mimer to Rachel, that means he already started the process of being married to her.
Yep.
Says Rabban Gamliel, that if he started mimer with Rachel, right? Sheyesh get la'acher mimer, that giving a get here, if mimer really works to make Rachel already like his wife, then really, technically speaking, this get should be irrelevant. Meaning, if truly mimer works, let's say to say mimer kiknusa, to say that it's mamish like they're married, then giving a get to Dina is irrelevant because he already took care of everything with Rachel. It's only because we don't say that the mimer is completely kindness her. We normally
the get, like you said before, takes care of the whole house.
Let's say we would have. I don't know if you remember this opinion we saw earlier in the Masechta a little bit, maybe like a week or so ago. It feels like a million years ago. There was an opinion held that mimer is kiknusa, that it means it's mamish like they're married menatayr. So if you would say mimer is married menatayr, then this get he gives after is irrelevant. Because Rachel's already completely married to him.
But the get he's giving should satisfy the whole house, even if it's they're married.
Oh, no.
It's as if he gave them.
Well, no. If it's knusa, then Dina's basically still give her a chalitza. Yeah, but if mimer is like the same thing, it's almost like it's yibum without the act of bia.
That I get it, but by giving a get to Dina, it's like giving a get to Rachel.
Okay.
Like what you said before, because it's the house. You're doing. So I understand they're married, but the get takes care of it in that other scenario.
So what you're saying
Other
now,
opinion.
the part of what you're saying, if Maimer is truly kiknusa,
Yeah.
what you're saying, this doesn't make sense. Meaning this
No,
get,
that does make the get takes care of everything.
why would it take care of it?
You're married to Rachel.
It's already married to Rachel. Why would the get with Dina affect his marriage with Rachel?
It
If I
does
give a get to that
because
woman,
we
how does that
care
affect
about
my
the
wife?
Shimon.
I already took care of the house. I already took care of the house in this discussion. Meaning, aliba de emes, truthfully, Maimer is only midirabanan. If it's only midirabanan, then it's clearly not taking care of the Zika. The Zika is still there. So says Rabbi Gamliel, if I give a get after, this get takes. It has the effect of doing what? Making it usher for me to now do Yibum with Rachel. I'm usher to do Yibum with Rachel. This is what Rabbi Gamliel says. So if I give Maimer and then I follow it up with a get, the get takes. But he also, so serious. The first thing he says is, if I give Maimer first, and then I do the get second, right? Then we say that the get takes. What if I do get first, and I do the Maimer second? So that means I've given a get to Dina. So that means now the halacha is I can't do Yibum with Rachel. That's obvious, right? If I give Maimer now, does the Maimer take? What's the nafkamina? Well, if now I have to give Chalitza to someone, right? Because I can't do Yibum with them, do I also need to give a get to Rachel? If the Maimer takes, I got to give her a get. If the Maimer doesn't take, and again, if the get here means that it's like I've severed the bond completely, it's again similar. Svara is the opposite. If Maimer takes in the first case, then this get shouldn't be chal. If the get takes completely, then the Maimer shouldn't be chal. The nafkamina is in the first case, I should be allowed to do Yibum with Rachel because I already took care of it with the Maimer. I just got to finish it off to do the Ma'aser. The get should be irrelevant. And then the second case, the halacha nafkamina, is when I do Chalitza, does Rachel also get a get because the Maimer took? So it says Rabbi Gamliel, Umoida Rabbi Gamliel, sheyesh get acher Maimer, u'Maimer acher get, that in both cases they take. If you would have only said one or the other, you can conclude some things. But by saying that both take effect after the other, what do you see? He get adif. If get is stronger, loy lahani Maimer abasrei. V'i Maimer adif loy lahani get abasrei. Meaning, if one is stronger than the other, then the second thing shouldn't have worked in that case, whichever one it is. But from the fact that he says that both will work after the other, what do you see? Elalav shmamina ki adadininu. They're the same, meaning they don't have one mila over the other. Therefore, shmamina, that they're the same. If they're the same here, then they're the same here. The Gemara is trying to say, from here you see, let that be the answer to the question. What was the question? The question was, who should you do chalitza to? Should you do chalitza to Rachel or to Dina? Well, Rachel's a problem to do chalitza with, because maybe we'll say that, what do you call it? Sorry, let's say it like this way. Maybe you should do chalitza to Dina because you've already started the process of severing with her by giving her a get. Or no, maybe we'll say that Rachel's chalitza should go first because we said that once you start Maimer with her, the Zika's stronger. The stronger Zika means the chalitza's stronger. So now we're saying, no, la'olam, there's no difference. Maimer and get are the same. Whichever one you want to do chalitza with, you can do chalitza with that woman, and therefore you'd be good. Let's just do the next Gemara, and then we'll call it a day. Says the Gemara. Yeah? We can erase these now. We're done with these. Okay. Says the Gemara like this. Amar Rav Huna Amar Rav. Beis Achiyos Yevamos. Comment. You're going to want to hear this.
Yeah, I need to.
You have to go?
Yeah, no, I just need to. Just follow up with.
Is it like a 10-second thing, or?
It's a 30.
I'd rather wait and just make sure you follow it. There's no reason for us to sit here if you're not going to.
You guys finished this up?
No, just comment needs a second. We're going to finish.
How much longer do we have? Half hour?
No, 10 minutes at the most.
Where is it building? Your building. Oh, they're in the theater. Rabbi, can I hang out with you for 2 minutes after?
Yes, of course.
That's true.
Crazy like.
Baruch Hashem. Shimon and Levi.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Shimon.
Mashiach is Yevamos.
The bargain. That was the one they lost. That was the one we got. And so he was another guy. My picture, you're right. My circle for circuits, literally, my 6-year-old grandchild just didn't wake up.
You okay? 100%.
I might have to respond to somebody. But good stuff.
Okay. The following is the case. New discussion. Says the Gemara. Amar of Huna Amar Rav. This is going to be the opinion of Rav. It's going to say Machlekes Rav and Rav Yochanan. We're going to start it, and we'll pick up tomorrow. Beis Achios Yevamos. Rachel and Leah are sisters. So they're Yevamos, meaning we're going to have Shimon and Reuven dying. I'm not crossing them out. What I'm doing is I'm writing that Reuven dies first, and then Shimon dies. So the order matters here. Reuven is dying first. So that means Rachel is falling to Levi first, and then Leah is falling to Levi. So Rachel's falling first, then Leah. Okay. Says the Gemara. Rav Huna Amar Rav, Beis Achios Yevamos, Shenaflu Lifnei Yavam Echad. So Reuven dies first, then Shimon dies, and now I have two sisters falling to Levi. The order matters. Chalatz l'rishayna, if he did chalitza to Rachel. What?
Shimon did it first.
No, Shimon. No.
He said,
Oh, Levi.
No.
Reuben died first.
Hold on one second. Now you got me confused.
So Rachel fell to Levi.
Slowly.
Yeah, Levi.
Yeah, Levi. Says the Gemara like this. Chalatz l'rishayna hutra. Right? He did chalitza to Rachel. Rachel's good. The chalitza works. When Reuven died, she fell to Yibam. Before Shimon died, in that moment, he could do chalitza with her. There's nothing to talk about. When she was a Yevama to Levi, she was not yet Levi's. Let me just make sure. A second. Yeah, Leah had not fallen to him just yet. So in that very moment, Levi was perfectly well and good to do chalitza. In fact, he could have done Yibam.
It's a regular.
So chalitz l'rishayna hutra. Now Shimon dies and Leah falls. Chalatz l'shniya hutra. Yeah, good. Now, what happens if instead of doing chalitza, says the Gemara, mesa shniya? Sorry, mesa rishayna. Let's say Rachel dies. Okay. So now, what happens?
Rachel died when?
So Reuven dies, Rachel falls to Levi, and to Shimon technically, but she's an erva to Shimon. Remember, it's Shimon's wife's sister. Yeah.
I lost
In
it.
fact,
I'm sorry, I lost it.
I think I'm confused. Let's leave Levi off the board for just a second.
Yeah.
I think it's easier if we discuss it with Shimon. I think it's a smarter way to do it. Let's start again.
Reuben, Shimon.
Rav Huna Amar Rav, Beis Achis Yevamos, Rachel and Leah. The reason why they're Yevamos is because the reason why you need a Levi is because they got to fall to someone, right? Rachel falling to Shimon, yeah, you need Levi on the board. Good.
Reuben and Shimon are brothers, and
Reuben, Shimon, and Levi are brothers. Reuben and Shimon are married to sisters. We've seen in this case many
Are they
times.
married to Leah and Rachel?
Right, Reuben, Rachel, Shimon, Leah. Okay. Now, if Reuben and Shimon were to die and fall to Levi, we've discussed this many times. Achos kukasei, right? Okay. Let's look at it from Shimon's perspective. It's a smarter way to look at it. Let's say Reuven dies. Rachel falls to Shimon and Levi. She's a Yevama. Why? Because although to Shimon she's an erva, she is his wife's sister. That's an actual erva. So she does not fall even to Shimon, but she still is kuka to Levi. So you understand that if Levi does chalitza with Rachel, Rachel goes free. Let's say before he does chalitza with Rachel, Shimon dies. So first Rachel fell, and now Leah's falling. So Levi has Rachel and Leah to deal with. The halach is that Rachel, he could do chalitza with her, and it covers, and then he could do chalitza with Leah, and it covers, and everything's fine. What happens if Rachel died? So Reuven dies. Rachel now falls to Shimon and Levi. In that very moment, who is she to Shimon? An erva, wife's sister. Yeah. What if now
Rachel dies.
Rachel dies? No, sorry. Hold on one second. Yeah, well, let's do it this way. Sorry, my bad. Sorry. What if instead of Rachel dying, Leah dies? Right, you follow? So now Reuven died. Rachel fell to Shimon and Levi.
Okay.
But when she fell, Leah was alive. So that was an erva. And now Shimon's wife dies. Can Shimon do Yibum with
I
Rachel?
just got back, huh? You guys just got back?
Yeah, got back Tuesday morning.
Okay.
Question.
What if I,
Mesa Rishona,
potentially, Christmas?
Mutter B'Shnia. Vein Tzarich Lomar. Well, I'll say it. Explain it outside in a second. Vein Tzarich Lomar Mesa Shnia Shemutter B'Rishona. So the order matters here. Okay. You understand that from Shimon's perspective, this is an Achos Isha, right? So we're looking at it from both Levi and Shimon's perspective. From Shimon's perspective, this is an erva. This is wife's sister. Wife's sister is Achos Isha. That's an erva. But Achos Isha, the halacha is that Achos Isha, once your wife dies, your sister's mutter. Correct? That's true in general. So if that's true in general, so now, if let's say, sorry. So now that you understand that from Shimon's perspective, that would be an erva. What about now from Levi's perspective? So start again. Reuven dies. Rachel falls to who? To Shimon and Levi. Well, right now they're married. She's an erva. She's not falling to Shimon. But to Levi, Achos Kukasai says that Leah, right? When Rachel fell, she was not Achos Kukasai because she was on her own. And then Shimon died. Now Rachel and Leah are falling. So Rachel starts off as being okay. But now that Leah is now falling to him, well, Leah is Achos Kukasa. And also technically Rachel is Achos Kukasa, right? But she didn't start as Achos Kukasa. So now what happens if Reuven dies, Mesa Rishona, now we're saying Rachel dies, he's allowed to be with Leah. Why? Because what would be the reason why he's not allowed to be with Leah? Because she is Achos Kukasa. But now Rachel dies, just like Achos Isha is mutter once your wife dies, so too Achos Kukaso is going to be mutter once your wife dies. So if Rachel is only my wife because of Zika, well, once Rachel dies, Leah is mutter to me. We'll call Rachel as the Rishona, and we'll call Leah the Shnia as we read the Gemara, so you can know who it's referring to as we read it. Yeah. So it says the Gemara, Mesa Rishona, if Rachel dies, Levi's mutter b'shnia, he's allowed to not only do chalitz, he's allowed to do yibum with her, right? Ve'ein tzarich loymar mesa shnia, and it's for sure pashut in this scenario. If Leah dies, right, first, shemutter b'rishona, that she's now allowed to marry Rachel. Let's just work out why. If Leah dies first, again, if Reuven dies first, that means Rachel first became his Yevama, first one. And in that moment, she was a perfectly fine, normal Yevama. Nothing wrong with her. It was only when Leah became a Yevama when Shimon died that it created a problem of Achos Kukasa. Right?
Levi.
So that means Rachel existed in the world at one moment perfectly okay to him. Right? So
To Levi.
to Levi. So it's obvious that if Leah dies, Rachel's going to be mutter because she started her relationship with Levi as being mutter. She only became temporarily usher when Shimon died. But if Leah were to now die, Rachel's going to be okay to do Yibum with. Because she started off her connection to Levi as being allowed to do Yibum. The Chiddush of Rav is that even if Rachel dies first, meaning Leah never had a moment in time that she was ever mutter to Levi. The moment Shimon died, she was being let into a Zika relationship with Levi at a time when he had an existing Zika relationship with Rachel. So she entered the world of Yibum already Asa. She never had a moment of Heter. Whereas Rachel had a moment of Heter. Before Shimon died, she was okay to Levi. So says the Gemara. Mesa Rishona, if Rachel dies first, Mutter B'Shnia, which is a Chiddush. Ve'ein Tzarech Lomar, and for sure Mesa Shnia, that if Leah died first, Mutter B'Rishona, why? And he says it, what I just said. Mishum Dahavya Yevama Shehutra, because Rachel would be a Yevama that was first Mutter, V'Nesra, and then temporarily became also because of Achos Kukaso, V'Chazr V'Hutra, and now she's Mutter when Leah dies, right, in this case. Tachzur Lehetera Harishan, Rachel just goes back to her original state when Reuven originally died, because she started off as being Mutter. It was only a temporary Isser. But again, it's a bigger Chiddush to say the opposite. To say that if Rachel dies, you're going to allow Leah to be Mutter. She was never, ever Mutter. It's only now that Rachel's dying that you take the Achos Kukasa off. Maybe you'll say that once she was introduced to Levi and Yibum as Usser, she's always Usser. That's going to be the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, no. Mesa Shnia Mutter B'Rishona. I agree with you. If Leah dies, that Rachel is going to be mutter, because since Rachel started off as being mutter, she only temporarily became usher. Now she's going to go back to being mutter. Aval Mesa Rishona, but if Rachel dies first, usher B'Shnia, Leah is going to be usher, and he says the reason my taima Shekol Yevama She'ein Ani Koireba B'Shas Nefila Yevama Yava Yaleh. If I can't talk about a woman and say that there's a mitzvah sibum with her, min haTorah that you can actually do. We're going to treat this.
Yes.
We're going to treat this. I'm going to say it again. Middle of thought. Yeah. So Levi, from Leah's perspective, says Rabbi Yochanan, if Rachel dies first, Leah, when Shimon died, was usher to Levi because at that time Rachel was alive. There were achas kukaso. The fact that Rachel is dying now, taking away the achas kukaso, says Rabbi Yochanan, I say the following. Kol Yevama, she'enani koraba b'shas nefila, Yevama yavayala. If at the time that Shimon dies, that woman is usher, she's always usher. That's a klal that he has. The fact that the circumstances have changed, that Rachel died, so now she's no longer achas kukaso, does not matter. At the moment of nefila, she was an isser.
Wow.
Maybe she wasn't an Arab, it's only an isser rabbanan, but at that moment in time, you can't do yibum. Yibum is not going to now be mutter just because Rachel, right? He uses a very strong language. He says it's no different than an Arab situation. If at the time, let's use a raw analogy. Let's say you have a regular case of Yibum. Reuben and Shimon are brothers. Shimon's married to a couple of ladies, and one of them is Reuven's daughter. Or better yet, Shimon has one wife. Shimon dies and leaves over a wife to Reuven, and Shimon has no kids, right? What if at the time that Shimon died, he did have a kid? But the kid died 5 minutes after he died. So technically now he has no kids, right? So why don't we say you have a mitzvah sibum with his wife?
Right.
The answer is you don't, because at the time he died, and that moment, he had kids. The fact that they died after doesn't change anything. At the time of death, there was no mitzvah sibum because he had children. So too over here, at the time of Shimon's death, what was Leah? Achos kukasa. The fact that the Achos died after the fact is irrelevant. Right now, when Shimon dies, Levi's Isser. Once that's an Isser, it's always an Isser. You all right, Rabbi?
Yeah.
Okay. So says the Gemara, that's the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan. So just very quickly to summarize, Rav and Rabbi Yochanan are specifically arguing, do we say that when Shimon dies, that moment is all that matters? Rav says, as long as the sister, the cause of the problem dies, we're only dealing with the Rabbanans here. There's no big deal. So the only reason why Levi can't do even with Leah is because Rachel's alive. Rachel's dead, just like my wife, if she should die, chas v'shalom, the sister becomes mutter. So too, my Zika should become mutter. Says Rabbi Yochanan, no. If in practice Levi can't do even with Leah the moment Shimon dies, he can never do even with Leah, no matter what happens in the future. That's the machlekes Rav and Rabbi Yochanan. It says the Gemara, the Rav Leslie Haisvara. He doesn't hold of this argument we just made, that once Leah comes into the world as usher, she's always usher. Rav, he said the literal words. He actually said these exact words. Now, the case that he said these words are slightly different, right? We still have two brothers, Reuben and Shimon. And we'll say that Reuben is married to Rachel, and Shimon is married to Leah, and they're sisters. Okay, now, says the Gemara like this. What's the case? The case is, what happens if Reuven dies? And in this case here, Levi is less important, but let's think about it. Reuven dies. In this moment, like we said, Rachel is what? Is an erva. What happens if now, let's leave Levi out for a second. Well, we need Levi in order to make Rachel Yevama, because otherwise, at the moment, she'd be free to go. So Levi's there, but he's not really serving much of a purpose, other than so that when Reuven dies, Rachel is still as a kukal yavam, because if it would only be Shimon, it's an erva. Let's say now, this is the case I mentioned earlier. Let's say now Levi dies. Leah dies. So can Shimon do Yibum with Rachel or not? This is the case I started the conversation off with. Remember, before Leah died, Rachel would be his wife's sister. It's erva. So Rav once said, since when Reuven died, Rachel was an erva, because why? His wife was still alive when Reuven died. So in the moment of Nefila, there's no mitzvahs yibum. Says Rav, the fact that Leah now dies, which in the world of Achos Isha should make Rachel mutter to him, and she's still a Yevama. Why is she still a Yevama? Because Levi hasn't done yet any yibum, so she still is a kukali Levi. We don't say that like retroactively the Zika occurred also. Because at the moment of death, if there was no Zika, you can't create Zika at any point in the future.
Yep.
So says Rav said this Svara. You
Well,
see
this is
clearly
it.
holds of the Svara here. Why doesn't he hold it over the case in Rabbi Yochanan? Where when it's not an erva situation, it's just talking about achas kukasai. So he says, very simple. What do you mean? It's the rice the Rabbana. So he says, honey when you're talking about a scenario where from Shimon's perspective, Rachel is an Isser Daraisa of erva. There I'm going to say that once there's no Zika, you can't manufacture a later Zika. Aval hocha Zika the Rabbanon. There's a Zika min ha-Torah for sure. The Zika here, the only problem here is going to be an Isser Darabanan. And so since once she dies,
those sisters, wasn't it?
yeah, it's a case of sisters. Since once she dies, once Rachel in that example before dies, well, what's the whole reason why Leah should be usher? Not this case, the case we drew before. Leah is just achos kukasai. Well, she's no longer my sister, my
How
wife.
would that case different in this case again?
This case is talking about where the reason why Shimon can't do yibum with Rachel is because it's Shimon. Before we were talking about Levi. So from Levi's perspective, Levi would only have a problem with achos kukasai. So since it's talking about achos kukasai, it's going to be mutter.
Oh,
Good?
very good.
And we'll pick up from here Eisvei on the Rabbi Yochanan's opinion. We'll review it tomorrow. But sorry for the